What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, but more importantly, welcome to another edition of the Round Recap, where we turn our attention back to Round 8, talk about every game from start to finish, all the fallout, all the on-field news, all the off-field news. If it went down in Round 8, it gets spoken about in today's video. And Round 8 was a very unexpected round, and in many retrospects, it just continues the roller coaster trend that we have seen throughout 2025. I mean, on paper, we were presented with some of the worst booking, fixture-wise that we have seen this year, but yet those games turned out to be absolute bangers, and games that should have been closer, hard-fought contests blew out to absolute smackings, and fuck, there were some smackings this weekend. Round 8 kicked off with one of the most talked about games leading into the round, and that was Essendon hosting North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. Was it Marvel or was it the MCG? No, it was at Marvel on Thursday night. And again, on paper, this read as one of the worst bookings of the year. Thursday night primetime football, Essendon, North Melbourne. Two teams that have been severely underperforming, especially North Melbourne, and people were, getting stuck into the AFL for making this a primetime game. People were talking about other teams that were more deserving, and trust me, there were plenty of games that would have fit this bill more. Collingwood versus Geelong, for example, could have fit in this slot perfectly. Having Brisbane and Gold Coast play on a Thursday night primetime slot instead of a Sunday night game would have fit perfectly. And yet, here we are at the conclusion of the round, with Essendon versus North Melbourne being one of the games of the round. I don't think many people would have expected this, but it fell the way of Essendon by 3 points. The final score, Essendon 9-11-65, defeating North Melbourne 9-8-62. This was huge. This was a game that at one point you could have just turned your TVs off and thought that Essendon were running home with a huge win. At quarter time, they led 6-1-37 to 2-3-15. For the rest of the game, to put it into perspective, Essendon only went on to kick 3 goals, but they kicked 10 behinds. They had 13 scores effectively for 3 goals. After quarter time, North Melbourne extended their run from 2 goals 3 to 9 goals 8. So they were a lot more accurate in front of goal, and that's ultimately what brought them back in the game. Essendon's, failure to convert. And again, I feel that falls on the fact that we are seeing a makeshift forward line thrown together. We have spoken about Essendon's forward half pretty strongly throughout all of my round recaps this year. Obviously, they trade out Jake Stringer at the end of last season. We've got Kyle Langford still out injured. Peter Wright has come in, but has had to play more of a ruck-centric role, given the, the going down of Sam Draper. I'm just trying to pick up the statistics here just to talk about some particular numbers. But when we look at the goals that were kicked, Archie Perkins, not really known as a goal scorer, but he kicks the most for Essendon on the day. Nate Caddy comes through with 2. Nick Martin kicks 1. Langford back in after injury, kicks 1. Kako kicks 1. Hobbs kicks 1. That was their scoring avenue. Peter Wright only kicked 2 behinds for the game. When you have a look at everybody who missed, actually, that's probably a better scope of what we've got. Nate Caddy kicked 3 behinds. Peter Wright kicked 2. Ben Hobbs kicked 2, Perkins kicked 1, Merritt kicked 1, Gresham kicked 1. It was a game that could have been a huge blowout if Essendon had the right personnel in, and they're already hit bad enough with injuries this year. They had some really bad injuries go down in this game, probably none more than the injury sustained to the man who has been moved around into a position that I feel was a little bit awkward when named, but I feel he was starting to hit his straps, and that was Harrison Jones, who started as what looked to be maybe a key forward type role, has moved to the wing and has really started to find his feet, which is ironic given the severity of the injury that we saw. Now, when commentating teams, on not even social media and stuff like that, but in the game itself, when it comes to the post game, if they turn around and tell everybody at home they are only going to replay the incident one time and they are not going to slow it down, it's going to be bad. And Harrison Jones in the contest just lands on his ankle, and his ankle goes from, you know, like leg to ankle being like that. You know, his leg is straight down, and his ankle's fucking like this. You know, it looked fucked up. Now, blows my mind that this guy cleanly dislocated his ankle. He popped his entire fucking ankle and foot out of its fucking socket clean. No breaks, no fractures. He has suffered the slightest little foot fracture underneath his foot and is only going to maybe miss 4 weeks of football. Given it looked like he had snapped his foot clean in fucking half, that is a blessing from the gods for Essendon. Not as good, however, for the groin injury that saw Jade Gresham sit out the rest of the contest on the bench, and Jordan Ridley, who has picked up another soft tissue injury. It seems to be the opposite hamstring, I believe, to that he has recently returned from. This is a guy that has won a club best and fairest. This is a guy that has capabilities at the peak of his powers of being within an All-Australian discussion as a defender. He has talent abound. It is too bad he can't show that talent because he spends more often than not in rehab because of all these soft tissue injuries. It is it's incredibly unfortunate, hugely unfortunate. On the side of North Melbourne, Archer has gone in and done his hamstring, which was done rather early in the game. It did look a little bit innocuous. I haven't seen any updates on that just yet as to how long he is going to miss, but it's never good to see a player go down with injury, especially if it's a young player that is starting to become a component of rebuilding your club's culture and your club going forward. So I wish all of those players, obviously, all the best in their recovery, especially those, you know, especially like Jordan Ridley. It's just so sad to see a player with so much talent be hampered by injury. I do feel at this point in time, with how often or not he is being injured, he could end up retiring prematurely because injury forces his hand, which would be incredibly upsetting. However, again, a game on paper that looked like it was going to be an absolute bloodbath. A lot of people expecting Essendon to just walk in and win this game by 30, 40, 50 points. Falls the way of 3 points to Essendon. Almost like a player like, I don't know, Paul Curtis, for example. Would have been very handy to have out there as a game winner. I'm just saying. And while we're just on the topic of talking about Essendon and North Melbourne, you know, can we just talk about the fact that Zach Merritt must have the fucking bulkiest shoulders of any player in the AFL, because anybody who has carried a team for as long as Zach Merritt has to be made of fucking steel. His last quarter performance alone almost, in many retrospects, single-handedly won Essendon this game of football. When we're talking about, you know, the league's best leaders, and we're talking about people that are in, you know, career best form, and we're talking about All-Australian contention, we're talking about who could be a Brownlow Smoky, Zach Merritt, by all means, is in every single one of those conversations. He is one of the league's best captains. He should be very much pushing early for this year's Brownlow after the performances he's been putting in. And as far as All-Australian goes, I think he should have one arm already through on a jacket. So feel free to do with that as you will, because I shit on the Bombers sometimes on this channel, but not today, because Zach Merritt, he's fucking the complete package. And on the same token, while I'm trying to beat Essendon up a little bit here, Zach Merritt committing to that club with them not really showing too much and being a little bit up and down on where they're going moving forward is huge, because this guy deserves a hell of a lot fucking better. He deserves to have a premiership. He deserves to win a Brownlow. I don't know whether he wins those at Essendon. Big call? Shit call? I don't know. You tell me. We went back to Marvel Stadium on Friday night with, again, another game on paper that looked absolutely terrible. St Kilda hosting Fremantle. A lot of people expected Fremantle to rock up and absolutely obliterate St Kilda. I, in my tipping video, said that because Fremantle had lost to Melbourne, you know, a couple of weeks back, and then they have a decent win at home the following week, they'll probably lose this game because it just continues the roller coaster ride that Fremantle has been taking their, you know, their supporter base on. They didn't just fucking take them on a roller coaster ride. That roller coaster derailed and crashed hard like it was a Final Destination film. This game was so fucking tedious and monotonous to watch. Quarter time scores 14-6. Half time scores 27-7. It was still anybody's game. 20 points up. Fremantle still well within the realms of catching. St Kilda went from 4 goals 3 to 8 goals 6 in the third term, while Fremantle advanced from 1 goal 1 to 2 goals 3. For the rest of the game, Fremantle went and put on a further 3 goals to St Kilda's 6. This was a complete turnaround in the second half from St Kilda, and I can tell you why. Ross Lyon would have got them in the rooms at half-time and torn the fucking paint off of those walls. I can tell you right now, as somebody who has met Ross Lyon, as somebody who has learnt a lot of coaching craft from Ross Lyon, and as somebody who admires Ross Lyon, despite my belief that Ross Lyon is not the man to take St Kilda to the promised land, he is still one of the best footy minds in the game. It's just, I feel his mind sometimes is too defensively sound and he's too one way in how his team operates. And he just would have gone to town on that team. He would have fucking, as I said, ripped paint off the walls. He would have picked out individuals. He would have gotten stuck into them, up in their face. And because they came out as a completely different beast in that second half. And it really fails to fucking strike me why Fremantle performed as poorly as they did. Because Fremantle on paper, and I think I'm going to reference the term on paper quite a bit in today's video. On paper, Fremantle have one of the best lists in the competition. They have one of the most comprehensively sound and well-rounded, lists. You look at a best 23 scenario, you look at them defensively. They have Luke Ryan, they've got Jordan Clark, they've got, Alex Pearce. They've got those players. They've got role players like Chapman that rolls through that back line. They are really solidified. In the midfield, they have, even though Luke Jackson is currently out injured, they do have Luke Jackson when available. Shaw Darcy, Andrew Brayshaw, Caleb Sarong. They have young kids running through the midfield on rotation as well. Then you go up forward. They've got Josh Tracy. They've got Jai Amos. They go and pick up Shea Bolton in the trade period. They have, Frederick. They have Switkowski. They have players that can get the job done everywhere, all over the field, and yet still find a way to fumble games like this that they should win. This is a season that has seen them lose the games that they should have comfortably won, and this would have them, in reality, sitting amongst the top 4. And I do believe that when they are playing their best football, they represent what a top 4 team looks like. It's just too far in between when you see those, those wins happen and those streaks put together. Players that we have seen this year that are, supposed to be the leaders of the club running around and they've been so dominant each and every week, had really down games. There was no positions around the field that were out of place. They were all playing their role. It's just so hard to understand why they failed to deliver. And it's been hampered even further for Fremantle because Hayden Young has done his right hamstring, and it has been confirmed that he will miss the remainder of the 2025 season. That is a huge out for them because as a utility halfback midfield player, Hayden Young has untapped potential. It was huge. But just rattle the numbers of some of these players here. We're used to seeing, Andrew Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong tear it up. Brayshaw had 18 disposals. Caleb Sarong only had 15. To put it in perspective for you, Luke Ryan had the most disposals for Fremantle with 24. That is ridiculous. That is so fucking ridiculous. To think players like Mitch Owens and Cooper Sharman, who played predominantly in forward 50, had more disposals than Caleb Sarong for the entire game when Caleb Sarong is an inside midfielder. Huge! And St Kilda had some players that played out of their skin as well. I think this was the best game I've ever seen, Cooper Sharman play. Everyone's talking about how Max King's not there, so they're not going to be able to win games. Cooper Sharman just marks everything and kicks 4 goals too. He should have kicked 6. I don't know how he missed the 2 that he missed. They still find ways, and as much as we're talking about Fremantle here being on a roller coaster, St Kilda continue to do the same because they have a big win like this, and then they drop off the face of the earth again. I really feel Fremantle is a much better list and club than St Kilda, and yet St Kilda shattled them and shattled? We've developed a new word today. They shattled them. I was thinking about shattered and rattled. They shattled them right to their fucking core. We then shift to Saturday afternoon, where the absolute smackings come into play. Bulldogs hosting Port Adelaide out at Mars Stadium in Ballarat. Now, we all know when it comes to the Bulldogs playing here, it is almost like home ground advantage. They play out of their skin whenever they go to Mars, and they are just a different beast when playing at this ground. The history speaks for itself. But if you had told me going into this game that the Bulldogs would be walking away 90-point victors over Port Adelaide, I would have told you to not only put the weed down that you were smoking, but pass it around, because there's some others that might want to have a bit of a toke, you know what I'm saying? This was as big an obliteration as you will ever witness for the duration of the year. This was huge, because not only does it put into perspective where Port Adelaide's list is, but I think it officially announces that the Bulldogs do have the artillery at hand to push for a premiership this year. And a lot of the media experts are now coming out and saying, you know, amongst the 4 or 5 teams that you could comfortably, that's all, folks. Of all the teams you could comfortably say in the conversation for a grand final, the Bulldogs can now be officially within that conversation. That is what I was trying to get across to you guys. This was absolutely huge. This was the most cohesive that I have seen the Bulldogs play in a very long time. And it's no surprise that it's the players that have returned that really just complete the arsenal that the Bulldogs are building. I mean, we've already seen Bailey Dale this year come back to form after last year. You know, he might have been an All-Australian talk by the end of the year, but this was a player that was sub-risk. He was playing in the VFL. You know, it's part of the reason why Jack McRae left. Ed Richards has gone to another level this year. I believe he was one of the highest rated players over the entire weekend. You know, Tim English goes absolutely insane in this game. Matthew Kennedy, a lot of people talking about how big Bailey Smith has been for Geelong. Not enough people are talking about how big Matthew Kennedy has been for the Bulldogs this year. He has been sensational. Bontempelli coming back in, doing his thing. Adam Treloar comes back in for his first game and has a huge return. This is a team that is comprehensively showing they do not need Jamara Ugle-Hagan on their list. And as far as I'm concerned, any team that attempts to pick that kid up is fucking delusional. I think his days of playing at the Bulldogs are over. I don't think we're going to see him play a game this year. And if he lands anywhere else, I wish them all the best in trying to fucking make sure he stays on track, because he's off the hinges, and I don't agree with how he's been able to hide behind mental illness when he is actively posting on social medias that, you know, he's out at the pub, he's out at the club. People are spotting him absolutely off his face. Only a couple of weeks ago, close to my home, he was out in Cranbourne, you know, Melbourne Southeast, absolutely off his face at a family like establishment that, you know, families can go and eat dinner at. He was off his face there. So very interesting to see the developments of what happens with him, but I think the Bulldogs are putting their best foot forward, and they're showing that they don't need him, and they're showing that they are capable, and they are putting other teams on notice. This was huge. This was absolutely an announcement of them hitting the big stage. And on the flip side, the Port Adelaide, you know, they still had the usual suspects in Butters and Rosie and Wines and Horn Francis stepping up, but not good enough. It was a comprehensive belting. Probably very humbling for Port Adelaide. I don't know where Port Adelaide go from here. I feel Port Adelaide missed the top 8 this year. They're not playing good enough football to be playing it. So if they make it, I think it's off of dumb sheer luck, because there's plenty of other teams playing better brand than they are right now, including some teams that are below them on the ladder, which speaks volumes. But this outcome still blows my mind that we're talking about it. The Bulldogs by 90 points? What? Later on Saturday afternoon, the Smacking must have jumped on a bus from Ballarat and travelled down to Adelaide Oval, because Adelaide played host to Carlton, and while I was sure Adelaide would pick up a win here, again, if you had told me it was going to be by 10 goals, I would have told you were insane, but that's exactly what happened. Adelaide, 16-14, 110, defeated Carlton, 7-8-50. This is a game that could have been so much bigger, a blowout, if Adelaide had kicked straight, and that has been a tale of their story for many years now, inaccuracy letting them down, but this was a game where inaccuracy still had them win by 10 goals, by 60 points. This was huge, and it was a game that Carlton was never in. Quarter time, 5 goals, 3-33, led Carlton 2 goals, 2-14. Now, okay, you could probably argue they're only 3 goals behind, they can wrestle it back. But when they go from 5 goals 3 to 8 goals 7, and in that next quarter, Carlton only go from 2 goals 2 to 3 goals 4, no. And then Carlton in the next half only collectively kick 4 goals 4 for the rest of the game, when Adelaide go on to kick a further 8 goals 7. It could have been so much more. This could have been staring down the barrel of 80 or 90 points. This game could have been one of the biggest percentage boosters that Adelaide have had for the season, and it's coming up against a team that was considered to be a premiership favourite. Again, in reflection, if you were at the start of the season right now, prior to round 0, and you saw how the ladder situated itself after 8 rounds of football, and you saw what teams had won and had lost up until this point in time, I think it would blow a lot of fucking minds. I think a lot of people at this point in time would have had Adelaide well without of reach of the top 8. People would have had Carlton within the top 4. I personally still would have had Adelaide in top 8 calculations, because while I had them finishing, I think, either 9th or 10th, I did say they were the biggest threat to the top 8 if they could find continuity in their game. Wins like this takes you a long fucking way to getting it. It's just, again, the inconsistencies that we have seen from teams like St Kilda, Fremantle, Adelaide, even throw Carlton in the mix now. You don't know if they're going to get on a hot streak with these wins, or if it's just a spur-of-the-moment thing and they're going to drop back to obscurity the following week. But this was one of the most comprehensive performances of the year from Adelaide, and to me, at the very least, it should be getting people to have a conversation about their best being amongst the best. They were just absolutely incredible, and it wasn't no surprise when you talk about Adelaide performing. You've got Jordan Dawson stepping up, kicking 3 goals as your captain, being one of the best on ground, leading the charge. Rankin getting involved, Rochelle getting involved. Neil Bullen might not be on the same level as a Matt Kennedy or a Bailey Smith has been in retrospect to output, but his role at Adelaide has been criminally underrated since coming over this year. I feel he's been one of the biggest players for Adelaide moving forward. Fogarty kicked 2. I mean, BOG performances from players like Max McElhaney in defence, I feel he's not spoken about enough as well. Adelaide, I feel, have a very underrated list. They have many players that aren't getting discussed about that should have discussions being spoken about. You know, Max McElhaney in defence is huge. Rankin's year this year has been absolutely fantastic. I don't know whether it's Brownlow worthy, but he's definitely in All-Australian contention. Dawson's role this year he's been thrown around a bit, but he's found a way to persevere, and again was one of the best on the weekend. Obviously, talking about Carlton, you know, players like Cripps and Hewitt and Sard and Chera are all going to get named, but unfortunately was not good enough to get the job done. And after a weekend prior where the Carlton supporters were getting the Tupperware back out and they were popping the lids off, they're now scrambling to pick that Tupperware back up and hide it in the back of the fucking the cupboard again, because that was deplorable. Now, Saturday night, I didn't see the finish to this game, but a lot of media experts are lauding this game as one of the best home and away hitouts that we have seen in the past few years. And when I saw the outcome, I was genuinely shocked, because Geelong 13-12-90 came home to defeat Collingwood 12-15-87. Inaccuracy letting both teams down. There was a shot after the siren from the history-making man himself, Jack Crisp, who has officially now played the most consecutive amount of games in the AFL without suspension or injury. Kick after the siren would probably back him from where he normally was, but he shanked it, and instead of winning the game, he lost. But it was still great to see the Collingwood players straight away get all around him as if he did win, just to, you know, confirm to him it's okay, it's not your fault. There has been finger-pointing in this game, and by none other, first and foremost, by David King. Directly after the game, they cut to the Fox Footy booth, and he turned around and said that Geelong had 4 extra players out on the field in that game, and that all 4 of them were wearing green. He was talking about the umpires. Now, if I go to the team stats and have a look at the free kick count that totaled by the end of the game, it will show that Geelong, I believe, did fall on the positive side of that exchange, but it runs a little bit deeper than that. The free kick count ended 14-21 the way of Geelong. Now, David King, I believe, said something to the effect of the last 14 or 15 kicks paid for that game, 13 of those free kicks went the way of Geelong. To think that out of 14 or 15 free kicks in a game that was so close, in a game that saw Geelong win in the final term, we see Collingwood only receive 1 or 2 free kicks and Geelong get 13 of the bastards. Now, that I don't like to point the finger at umpires because people, some people find that to be scapegoating, but I feel when the game is on the line to be won and there is a line in the sand moment and then one team starts getting better output from the other when it comes to decision making, and it's not even necessarily the free kicks paid, it's the ones that go begging. Very questionable. I mean, there was a big one on the weekend. They were talking about Bobby Hill, whether his tackle was a trip, whether it was legal. Now, whether or not it was a starting tackle that was tackled correctly, his arms did slide down to the knees and contact below the knees was made, and that is regarded a trip. Anything from the knee down is considered a trip. Pay that's fine. Score review system pays a touched behind with, I'll see if I've got the image, I'll put it up on screen right now. A touched behind. This was deemed. Do you see the ball being touched, or do you see a genuine gap between the hand and the ball? It is hard to believe that in a country where we have definitive, camera angles and everything for the NRL and, with technology at its peak with things like the NFL and everything around the world, how can the AFL still be in the Stone Age when it comes to technology? I still personally feel the soft call for every decision should be a goal, and it is the score review system to disprove otherwise. I think at the very least there will be less confusion when it comes to the score review system, because if it is just definitively soft call, it's a goal, can I just check to see if it hit the post? Can I just see if it was touched? If there is no definitive, reasoning whether or not it was touched or not, then it's paid a goal. That way, umpire indecision doesn't come into the equation. I would love to have a conversation about this with you guys at home in the comment section down below. Let me know. I definitely feel Collingwood was hard done by in this game. This was a game that was a genuine belter from start to finish until the umpires crept in and, in my opinion, ruined a great game of football. I mean, there were great performances by both teams. It come down to a kick after the siren. It was set up and scripted for Jack Crisp to win it. It was great. It was golden. And then, as I said, when you look at the stat breakdown and you just see how the game was adjudicated after a certain point in time, have fun trying to argue against it. The stats don't lie. Geelong were kissed on the penis. Not as big of a smacking as what we saw over the round go down, but over in the West Coast hosted Melbourne, and in the end, after what was a decently hard-fought contest from West Coast up until half-time, mind you, Melbourne run out the victor by 32 points in a game that yet again saw Max Gawn go absolutely monster. He had a career high in disposals. I think he had something like 35 touches. As a ruckman, that is fucking incredible. It is now causing a conversation point with Max Gawn and discussing whether or not he is the best ruckman of the modern era. And they're talking from probably 2000 up until this point in time. And definitively, I think you can only talk about 2 ruckmen from that time onward, and Max Gawn is in the conversation. And then you've got Dean Cox, who very much revolutionised and readapted what a ruckman was, because he was getting, used to the ball around the ground. He was running with the ball. He was taking bounces. He was hitting up targets. He was very mobile for a big man. Whereas Max Gawn, I think, has redefined that further by becoming a genuine, defensive and offensive threat. He can take all those defensive marks and intercept marks around the ground. Forward half of the ball, he can launch a ball long. He's getting hand first to the ball. I definitely feel overall, especially given his resume when it comes to the things he's won, and he's on track to being an All-Australian again this year, I think Max Gawn clears Dean Cox. I think we are seeing the best ruckman of the modern era. And at his age, you'd think he'd be slowing down, but he is still putting up enough effort to tell me that he can play still a few more years. But still, the conversation must be had. Without Max Gawn, how big of a hole is that going to leave on Melbourne's list? Because we saw how They slipped against Richmond a couple of weeks ago when Gawn was off. We saw West Coast in periods of this game kind of wrestle back a little bit of momentum when Gawn was off the field as well. I mean, at half-time, West Coast led this game by a singular goal. It was a great contest, as I said, but then the drop-off happened, and the drop-off ended up being quite severe because Melbourne went on to kick 13 goals for the rest of the game after half-time. West Coast managed to score 7, so they didn't do too bad. They scored 7, but I mean, you can't let 13 goals go past that easy. It was just very comprehensive a loss. There was no coincidence that the floodgates kind of opened once Jeremy McGovern went down to injury. He will miss next week's hit out against Richmond due to concussion protocol. I feel Jake Melksham is incredibly lucky he didn't get suspended for this. And a lot of people are saying, oh no, he held his ground. It's forward craft. What Ryan Mansell did against St Kilda was forward craft. He pushed off a player to make ground, and unfortunately that player was pushed into a contest and got concussed. Jake Melksham hip and shouldered Jeremy McGovern into the back of a pack with no time to brace for impact, gets knocked out, subbed out for concussion protocol, but it's okay. Jake Melksham doesn't need to be suspended. Not one bastard that has pushed another into a contest since Ryan Mansell got suspended has been fucking done for it, and it has pissed me off. We have seen it almost every week, and Richmond was the only team to get fucked by it. Do you think it's under my skin a little bit? Maybe just a little bit, but at the end of the day, West Coast showing a little bit of fortitude and then dropping off, Melbourne just putting in a comprehensive second half performance, and still, up until this point in time, West Coast hunting for their first win of the 2025 season. Will it come at the behest of Richmond at Melbourne this coming weekend at the MCG? I don't know. But you would have thought at this point in time, West Coast would have been held in better stead than what they were this year. I think they should have absolutely had at least one win on the board, and it still begs a question for West Coast, because West Coast do have some aging players on this list. When those players move on, when they don't have Dom Sheed, Elliot Yeo, Jeremy McGovern, these types of players, Oscar Allen, who's more likely than not going to get traded, Harley Reid, who is most likely than not going to get traded, and big news on that this week, Richmond are apparently quote-unquote all in on wanting to secure Harley Reid. I know we've got a reputation for bringing on bad boys and giving second chances, but if we burn 2 first-round picks to bring that bastard in, I'll be very disappointed. But I think this year's off-season for West Coast may become very busy, because I know a lot of West Coast supporters that are saying to get rid of X, Y, and Z. I know, and if you actively follow the news, that there are some players that are actively looking around and wanting out. For a club that was bringing players in and looked like they were going to start steadily rebuilding, looks like people are trying to get off that ship. And I don't know whether it is, Andrew McQualter's style not sitting right, but people are sticking thin with him. Is he the right man for the job? Don't know. But yeah, West Coast in all sorts. Melbourne, couple of wins in a row now, starting to build a little bit of form. They've knocked off Fremantle, they knocked off Richmond, they've now knocked off the West Coast Eagles, starting to build up to it. And when players like Gawn and Petrarca and everything else is starting to really get into some form, starts to become a scary proposition. I think the biggest story out of this week, though, was Clayton Oliver removing himself. It was originally announced that he was a late withdrawal due to illness. It was then revealed that he removed himself from the game due to well-being and wellness. Do you know what that means, folks? Because we all know how his pre-season went down. That means I'm back on the drugs again and don't want to give a positive drug test. Here's an idea, AFL. Maybe do drug tests to everybody on the list, regardless of whether they're picked for that round or not, to see if there is a deep-rooted problem at said club. Again, Clayton Oliver got away with doing a lot over that preseason. He was seen by many off his face. You could see by the images circulating and his behaviour that he was definitely on something, so we're not shying away from that fact. But the AFL were quick to sweep that under the rug and try to fucking make us forget, weren't they? Hey? The first of 3 on Sunday saw Sydney hosting GWS in the battle for the bridge. GWS coming off of 2 back-to-back losses, Sydney looking for a bit of form, and Sydney won this game in the end by 14 points, 12-15-87, defeating GWS 10-13-73. This was huge. This was a game that I felt tipped on the back of an injury, and that injury came from Lewis Melican absolutely knocking Toby Bedford the fuck out. The hit was big. It saw him subbed out of the game. Lewis Melican has been suspended for 3 weeks due to said hit. And when you think about the fact that Bedford is a serious tagger, he could have shut down the likes of Chad Warner having influence. He could have ran with Isaac Heaney. He could have shut somebody else down. You know, Sydney played a defensive role with James Jordan and sent him forward to kind of play a negating role on Lachie Whitfield. And while Whitfield still accumulated a fair bit of the ball, wasn't as much as what we're used to seeing out of him, and his impact wasn't as that big. Jake Stringer as the starting sub for GWS comes on, and I think he comes on to kick 3 goals in the second half. You know, Kingsley's come out and said that he still needs to work on his fitness, which is a little bit alarming considering I feel Stringer has never been fit. And it's not just an extension of Essendon had him poorly trained, it's just Jake Stringer himself is poorly trained. I know that's kind of, you know, throwing rocks at glass houses considering I'm far from fit. But as a professional athlete, Jake Stringer has been behind the 8 ball for a few years now. But again, this was a game that was wrestled early the way of Sydney, like 34 playing 13 at quarter time. GWS managed to stem the flow and bring it back to 35 playing 41. Then at 3/4 time, 58 playing 44, still not out of the realm of possibility, but both of them managing to just pile on goals in the end. And unfortunately, because Sydney already had that lead on them, it was just too hard a gap for GWS to close, even though GWS came home incredibly hard. This now means GWS has lost their last 3 games in a row. And this was a club prior to that 3-game losing streak that I turned around and said I could envision already holding the Premiership Cup with how comprehensive they had been playing. What is happening? I don't understand. Again, this is a very similar like premise to what I spoke about with Fremantle. On paper, GWS have one of the most comprehensive listers. I'm getting so worked up that I'm fucking the English language right and royally without any lubricant today. I apologise, but one of the most comprehensive lists in the game. Defense to forward line. They have star power everywhere. I do not understand how they continue to fail to give up. Even again, this was a game that they lost, but you turn attention to the stats, I can guarantee you the top 5 players will be all GWS, if not close to it. 4 of the top 5. 4 of the top 5 by disposal are GWS players. 4 of the top 5 by champion data are GWS players. Finn Callaghan, Lachie Whitfield, Tom Green, Lachie Ash. Even then, the next top 5, GWS still have one in there. So out of the top 10 players ranked on the field, 6 of the 10 were GWS players. And even then, for Sydney, they're the expected. Matt Roberts, Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, James Jordan, and James Rowbottom sneaks in there as well. This, I don't understand where GWS is at. I don't know what's going on. I don't know whether there's any disconnect. Obviously, this is a game where both teams were very inaccurate in front of goal, and fortune could have changed had they been accurate. I mean, Darcy Jones kicks 1 goal 3. Jesse Hogan, 1 goal 3. Toby McMullen kicks 2 behinds. Toby Green only kicks the 2 behinds for the game. Lachie Ash kicks 1, but I mean, Lachie Ash you can forgive. He plays in defence. It's okay. But goal kickers, again, Jake Stringer kicks the most coming off of the bench. You've got Jesse Hogan, who is, you know, the reigning Coleman. He only kicks 1. Darcy Jones, 1. Tom Green kicks 1, but Toby Green fails to shoot a shot. I don't know. I don't know whether they need to hit reset. I don't know what they need to do, but I thought Sydney, honestly, without Joel Amati, given that injury that he has sustained to his hamstring, they would be in all sorts. But they're still finding avenues to score. When they can have players like James Jordan play a role and still kick 2, Warner kicks 1, Sheldrick kicks 1. I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm scratching my head. They had a slew of goal kickers. They even had players like Nick Blakey rolling off of half-back and kicking a goal. Joel Hamling, you know, predominantly known as a defender, kicks a goal. Oh, question marks. So many question marks. Sydney getting a must-needed win and a hard-fought win. GWS losing 3 in a row. You don't know where their next win's going to come from, but it needs to come quick because they need to shift momentum fast. Sunday afternoon, MCG, Hawthorn versus Richmond. We all knew how this was going to go down. Even me as a Richmond man knew how this was going to go down. Hawthorn 16-13, 109, defeated Richmond 6-8-44, Hawks by 65. It was upsetting because even though Richmond have been getting beaten, we have still found ways to kick at least 10 goals a game, and I thought that has been something we can hang our hats on, but we were just comprehensively beaten in this game, which again is sad because in the first quarter, the commentary team couldn't get over how well drilled Richmond looked, except for when we were moving the ball inside 50. We were finding avenues to shut down Hawthorn, switching play on the field, wanting to do their set kick-in routine. We were all on top of it. And then whenever it came to us moving the ball forward, we absolutely butchered it. We had them monstered by inside 50s in that first term, and I feel that could have set the tone early had we had hit the scoreboard in a big way. I think we had something like 16 or 17 forward half entries in that first quarter. And I think we only kicked like 2 or 3 behind, maybe, if we were lucky. It wasn't good, especially when Hawthorn were then so easily able to transfer the ball from the back half, to the forward half and score comfortably. Now, I've been in a bit of a TikTok war with a Hawthorn supporter, I suppose, was talking about how people have been saying free kick Hawthorn, and he was showing all the stats, and he was like, Hawthorn had 100 more uncontested possessions. They had this, they had that. Free kick count, 23-10. 23-10. Going into this game, Hawthorn was still averaging 7 to 8 more free kicks than Richmond were, collectively. They have had 50 more free kicks than Richmond have, collectively. This was a game that saw other instances, like we saw Bobby Hill get done for a trip tackle. Sicily laid a tackle very similar to Maurice Rioli, and not only did he end up tripping him, but after he was paid the free kick for holding the ball, that's right, he then grabbed Maurice Rioli by the jumper and shunted him down to the ground again, which should have been a reversal, but instead it was a 50 because Tim Taranto came in and flew the flag for his teammate and pushed James Sicily down to the ground. This was also a game that saw Hawthorn get very cocky in the way some of the players were handling themselves. There's footage of Nick Watson jerking it to the Richmond crowd and giving the finger and everything else. I don't know whether there'll be fines, but considering Bailey Smith and Harley Reid have been fined, I would assume Nick Watson will be as well. There was a lot of showboating going on. They were doing it way too easy, and they were way too cocky about it. I feel this is why when Hawthorn are up and about, so many people get upset, because it's the cockiness about them. It's not even an aura at this point. It's just plain cockiness and outright smugness. But you can't deny when Hawthorn are playing good football that they look fucking great doing it. They've done well. They've drafted well. They have traded well. They've got a very comprehensive team. Just sucks that when I've been hanging my hat on so many positives for Richmond this year as a Richmond man, weren't really many positives to come out of this game. Noah Bolter hurt his ankle. Don't know whether that's going to mean anything because we'll probably have a night game coming up in the next couple of weeks and his curfew is going to force him out of that game anyway. I'm glad we're at least playing West Coast at home this week, because had we got to have flown over to West Coast, he wouldn't have been making that flight, because there's no way known he's making it back before his 10 p.m. curfew. So, again, I feel that is a detriment more to the club than to the player and the person. I feel it impedes Richmond as a club, especially given how well Noah Bolter can play at his best. Like, he kept Ben King to, 1 goal a couple of weeks ago when we won, and then the following week we get smacked without him. So, I don't know. It's just very upsetting as a Richmond man. You try to find ways to get through the week. You get excited about a young list and how they're up and about, and there were still some young kids in this game that did some great things, but it's just hard to see effort just out-monstered and just morale drop, and you can just see on the kids' faces how dejected they were. It's just one of those wins for Hawthorn that is going to propel them forward, and it's a loss for Richmond that I feel could send us so many steps backwards when we've been taking so many steps forwards. You can lose games and still find positive ways to move forward. I don't know whether Richmond do that in this game. Uze came out and said in the post-game press conference that he was happy with the intent, but we just didn't get the job done. I honestly didn't see much intent in that game, especially, for the biggest duration when we were able to just confidently give the ball up as easily as we were. But there were some kind of glimpses here and there that kind of make me think, okay, if we can string some together, then we've got something to work with. It's a tale of two minds. It's a double-edged sword. You've got to take the bad with the good, but this was just more bad than good this week, and it hurt me deep in my soul. The final game of the round on a Sunday night, bit of a stupid fixture, but I know. It was the Q Clash, Brisbane versus Gold Coast. A lot of people saying this would be the best Q Clash we have seen in recent years. Gold Coast, I think, have only won 4 or 5 out of the 25 or 26 of Q Clashes that there have been. So Brisbane were well and truly on top in that regard, and they finished on top again, 17-point victors in a game that saw substitutes made early with one player from either team, retrospectively, 2 players total, going down with hamstring injuries and needing to be subbed out. Absolutely huge given the roles they play respectively for each of their teams. But it was, again, one of those games that was an incredibly slow start in many retrospects, but Brisbane just found a way to continue getting the job done. I mean, 10 played 7 at quarter time, very slow by Brisbane, but then Brisbane ballooned out to 32, playing 21 at halftime. Again, only 11 points. Door is still open for either team to win moving forward. Brisbane go on to kick a further 5 goals, 4 for the game. Gold Coast only mustering the 4 goals, 4 for the rest of the game themselves. So not much scoring at all, given, retrospectively how things went down, especially given in the last quarter, Brisbane only managed to kick the 3 behinds, while Gold Coast went on to kick 20 points. This could have been a game where if Brisbane had left that door open too much, Gold Coast could have crept in. And I've said that numerous times this year as well. Leaving the door open for certain teams means you're going to allow yourselves to be beaten when that final siren comes. It was just lucky enough. Brisbane had a big enough jump at certain points of the game that they couldn't be caught. This was a game that saw some players that usually don't get spoken about all too much truly stand up. At one point, we were talking about Levi Ashcroft and Will Ashcroft, who had the commentary team turning to the history books to see how many, what the record is for brothers and disposals. And it's still the Crouch brothers who have something like 84 or 85 disposals between the two of them back when they were both playing for Adelaide. Will Ashcroft finished on 34 for the game. Levi Ashcroft finished on 29. Now, I remember speaking to my dad during this game going down, saying I don't think Levi and Will both get 40 disposals each, but they came fucking close. I mean, Will Ashcroft only 6 off, and you had Levi Ashcroft who finished the 11 off, but still 29. Huge outing for him. 2 of the highest rated players, I think actually they were the 2 highest rated players on the field. They had huge games. Hugh McCluggage again, stepping up and doing what Hugh McCluggage does, even though Lachie Neale and Dane Zorko might not have had as much influence as they've had recently. They still found plenty of opportunity when they had the ball to be effective. They just comprehensively around the ground were so much better than the Gold Coast. Tuke Miller leading the way for the Gold Coast, Noah Anderson doing his usual thing. But again, this was a game where Matt Rowell was incredibly quiet by the standards he set, and this is starting to be a trend with him. We're used to now in previous years gone by seeing Rowell start off a season so fucking, on fire it is not funny. And then the drop-off happens. And this is now starting to become apparent this year too, because the last couple of rounds, he's been well off the mark. It's a abnormality I feel that he needs to get out of his game, because at his best, he could be one of the league's best by far. But what's it meant to be for the Gold Coast? It is another loss for them. It is another win in the books for Brisbane, especially another win in the Q Clash. But before we move on, I want to talk about something here. Somebody on Twitter posted they are sick of hearing country roads played every time Charlie Cameron kicks a goal. Now, Brisbane, for those of you that aren't aware, have a system going at the Gabba where each player has their own dedicated song, and if they score a goal, that song is played after the goal between the goal being kicked and the centre bounce being taken. There is nothing better, and I challenge you to find something better for me, in the AFL right now than seeing Charlie Cameron kick a goal at the Gabba, hearing Country Road played, and then cutting it off at the chorus as the bounce is taken, and hearing the Gabba just erupt and singing the chorus on its own. It gives me goosebumps every time. It is one of the best, if not the best thing to listen to in footy right now. And to say that, the club is woke for playing it and all this shit. I don't know whether people just forget what the word woke is and they just throw it around like it's nobody's business. Like they throw it like they're playing for Carlton, you know what I'm saying? This is something I want to see more of in the AFL. I want to see it embraced, and Charlie Cameron, easily, as far as celebrating a goal goes, has that down pat by a country mile by any team in the competition. Give me more Country Road, especially when Brisbane supporters are singing it that loud and proud. It gives me chills every time. I love it. At the conclusion of round 8, this is how our ladder sets up, and the wins and losses over the weekend have definitively started to set this ladder in stone. In first place, now with a 1-game win in hand, we have Brisbane on 28 points. In second place, we have Collingwood, and in third place, we have Hawthorn, both respectively on 24 points. Gold Coast rounds out the top 4 in fourth place, with Adelaide in 5th, the Bulldogs in 6th, and Geelong in 7th, but all 4 of those teams effectively tied for 4th place with 20 points. GWS in 8th, Fremantle in 9th, St Kilda in 10th, and Essendon in 11th, and Port Adelaide even in 12th. All of those teams on 16 points, all fighting for that top 8 spot. Outside of that, we have Carlton in 13th, Sydney in 14th, and Melbourne in 15th, all on 12 points. We then have Richmond in 16th on 8 points, North Melbourne in 17th with 4, and still hunting for their first win of the season, we have West Coast in 18th place. With all the business and monotony out of the way, we can now go to the fun stuff. We turn attention to the Hip and Shoulder MVP award for the 2025 season, and my team of the week for round 8. For those of you that might be catching this video for the first time and are not familiar with the process, team of the week is just like any other team of the week you see on social media. Coach, sub, and best 22 players in each role going off of what I deem to be the best of the round. And then the Hip and Shoulder MVP award acts just like the Brownlow would. Each game has a 3-2-1 vote system, best on ground getting 3 votes, then 2 and 1 respectively. And I brought in the team of the week this year because in the past, when I've done the voting system, there could be some players that have been hardly done by. They could have been in conversation for a 1 vote but haven't been, but they could have outperformed in their particular role over other players in the competition. So I thought it'd be a good way to not only recognise all players in the competition, but to also give avenue for discussion, because these are all objective to my own decision-making process. So some people might not agree with the players I vote with. Some people might not agree with the players who get into the team of the week. Or maybe you do agree. Whatever the case may be, it's a discussion point. So if you do agree with the votes I'm giving, if you don't, let's talk about it in the comment section down below. Let me know if I'm getting something right. Let me know if I'm missing somebody. But at any rate, we are kicking it off with the MVP votes for round 8. And it all starts with the Thursday night hit out with Essendon taking on North Melbourne. 1 vote, Harry Sheasel. 32 disposals, 21 kicks, 11 handballs, 9 marks, 5 tackles, 591 metres gained, and 3 score involvements. 2 votes, Tristan Cherry. 25 disposals, 11 kicks, 14 handballs, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 39 hitouts, 10 clearances, 266 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 3 votes, Zach Merritt. 35 disposals, 17 kicks, 18 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 490 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. St Kilda versus Fremantle. 1 vote, Callum Wilkie. 24 disposals, 20 kicks, 4 handballs, 14 marks, 3 tackles, 298 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Cooper Sharman. 16 disposals, 12 kicks, 4 handballs, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 265 metres gained, 4 goals, and 8 score involvements. 3 votes, Jack McRae. 38 disposals, 19 kicks, 19 handballs, 6 marks, 8 tackles, 14 clearances, 287 metres gained, and 10 score involvements. Western Bulldogs versus Port Adelaide. 1 vote, Ed Richards. 30 disposals, 17 kicks, 13 handballs, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 729 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Marcus Bontempelli, 23 disposals, 15 kicks, 8 handballs, 4 marks, 8 tackles, 1 clearance, 489 metres gained, 3 goals, and 10 score involvements. 3 votes, Tim English, 27 disposals, 15 kicks, 12 handballs, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 30 hitouts, 4 clearances, 345 metres gained, 3 goals, and 17 score involvements. Adelaide versus Carlton. 1 vote, Max McElhaney, 27 disposals, 20 kicks, 7 handballs, 12 marks, 1 tackle, 520 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Jordan Dawson, 22 disposals, 11 kicks, 11 handballs, 7 marks, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 268 metres gained, 3 goals, and 9 score involvements. 3 votes, Isaac Rankin, 29 disposals, 17 kicks, 12 handballs, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 5 clearances, 469 metres gained, 2 goals, and 12 score involvements. Collingwood versus Geelong. 1 vote, Sean Manor, 18 disposals, 10 kicks, 8 handballs, 6 tackles, 8 clearances, 246 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Bailey Smith, 34 disposals, 22 kicks, 12 handballs, 6 marks, 2 tackles, 5 clearances, 715 metres gained, 1 goal, and 5 score involvements. 3 votes, Patrick Dangerfield, 29 disposals, 10 kicks, 19 handballs, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 464 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. West Coast versus Melbourne. 1 vote, Cade Chandler, 26 disposals, 17 kicks, 9 handballs, 5 marks, 8 tackles, 1 clearance, 567 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Christian Petrarca, 29 disposals, 12 kicks, 17 handballs, 4 marks, 8 tackles, 8 clearances, 362 metres gained, 1 goal, and 7 score involvements. 3 votes, Max Gawn, 35 disposals, 13 kicks, 22 handballs, 8 marks, 47 hitouts, 9 clearances, 191 metres gained, 1 goal, and 12 score involvements. Sydney versus GWS. 1 vote, Tom Green, 34 disposals, 17 kicks, 17 handballs, 4 marks, 1 tackle, 6 clearances, 507 metres gained, 1 goal, and 4 score involvements. 2 votes, Finn Callahan, 33 disposals, 16 kicks, 17 handballs, 2 marks, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 536 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. 3 votes, Chad Warner, 24 disposals, 14 kicks, 10 handballs, 2 marks, 4 tackles, 7 clearances, 579 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. Hawthorn versus Richmond. 1 vote, Chankwath Jayath, 32 disposals, 22 kicks, 10 handballs, 7 marks, 1 tackle, 500 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 2 votes, Josh Battle, 33 disposals, 20 kicks, 13 handballs, 12 marks, 506 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. 3 votes, Massimo D'Ambrosio, 30 disposals, 23 kicks, 7 handballs, 9 marks, 1 tackle, 2 clearances, 796 metres gained, 2 goals, and 11 score involvements. Brisbane versus Gold Coast. 1 vote, Levi Ashcroft, 29 disposals, 19 kicks, 10 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 3 clearances, 368 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. 2 votes, Hugh McCluggage, 30 disposals, 19 kicks, 11 handballs, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 6 clearances, 557 metres gained, and 6 score involvements. 3 votes, Will Ashcroft. 34 disposals, 19 kicks, 15 handballs, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 9 clearances, 480 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. And with that, we still have a definitive top 3 overall with some shifting going on. In third place, with 11 votes total, we have Fremantle's Andrew Brayshaw. In second place, on 12 votes respectively, we have a tie between Essendon's Zach Merritt and Adelaide's Jordan Dawson. And in first place, still maintaining the lead despite not getting a vote this week, with 13 votes, is Collingwood's Nick Dacos. We now transition into the team of the week, which was a little bit hard to do because there were some players that I thought could have been on the ground over others, and I've chopped and changed this team so much, but I think the team I have landed on is the team that I think best represents the outcomes from round 8, at least in my eyes. Kicking it off in defence, across the back line, we have Max McElhaney and Bailey Dale in the back pockets, with Callum Wilkie at full back. I have Josh Dacos and Nasaya Wanganeen Malira on the half-back flanks, with Josh Battle at centre half-back. Across our centre line, we have Bailey Smith and Massimo D'Ambrosio on the wings, with Zach Merritt in the centre. Across our forward line, we have Isaac Rankin and Marcus Bontempelli on the half-forward flanks, with Cooper Sharman at centre half-forward, and Patrick Dangerfield and Jack Gunston in the forward pockets, with Brody Myercheck out of full forward. Max Gawn has another week in charge of the ruck line, with Will Ashcroft acting as ruck rover and Ed Richards in as rover. Our interchange has Tim English, Hugh McCluggage, Charlie Cameron, and Jordan Dawson. We have Chang Kuoth Jayath in as our sub, and this week's Coach of the Week is Dean Cox after Sydney's efforts against GWS. Dean Cox could have quite easily been Chris Scott up against Collingwood, but I just feel given where Sydney are at this year, getting a scalp over GWS, who should have won the game, is huge. And that is it. The round has officially been recapped. I want to thank you all for joining me yet again for another installment of the round recap. If this is something you enjoy, please do continue to hit that like button down below. There has been plenty of discussion points for you to chat with me down in the comment section, so feel free to do so. And if you've got any ideas for content that you would like to see, let me know as well. I've got some ideas cooking, but I always value your input at home. Do hit that subscribe button as well before you leave if you want to get on board the community we are building here. Over 100 members strong, and with your help, we can continue to build this into bigger and better things. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.